Hi, this is the fourth video in our series. We've looked so far at the SDK sample and a little bit about the Business Rule Composer. We then looked at how to test a policy in the Business Rule Composer. In the third video, we looked at the history and how you can track policies over the last few weeks or months using HAT. And now we're going to look at using the Business Rule Composer more in detail, how to create a policy from scratch or how to change or modify a policy. So let's go back to the Business Rule Composer, and let's suppose I want to modify this policy that was given to us in the SDK. Well, the first thing you can see, for instance, if I come over here and I want to change this number, if I click on it, there's no way to get the cursor to go there to change it. It's kind of like stuck, it's saved, deployed, it's immutable, it cannot be changed. Likewise, I can't drag and drop new things onto the actions. So the first thing you do is every single time you ever change a policy, you have to copy it. So you go to the version, not the policy itself, but the version of the policy, and you click copy. Then you go back to the policy name above the version and you say paste policy version. Okay, so now you see it says not saved, and we can now change these rules. So if I want to go over here and instead of making this 5, let's use a different one. Let's use the 3 and the 18. So here was the number 18. So if I change it here, I want to now make it 15. And remember, there was a negation of that rule. So this is where in the future we'll talk about vocabularies. Maybe I should call this a vocabulary called the minimum number of months. And then when I change it in this rule, I won't have to remember to change it in 2 places. So right now, if I change the employment status rule, I need to go to the negation of employment status rule and change that to 15 as well, because they're supposed to be opposites. Remember, there is no if then else statement. There's no else statement in the business rule. You have an if statement. So what you have to do is basically sometimes build opposite rules of each other, and they've done that here by using the not statement. Okay, so now I just want to show you kind of how to get a feel of how this tool works. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward, and the screens are unfortunately a little bit small. One of the first things you're going to need to be able to do is come here and pick your schema. So you're going to go to schemas. On this, first of all, there's 4 tabs. Vocabs we'll talk about in the future. Schemas, databases, and .NET classes. So on the schemas tab, you're going to right click browse, and then you need to go to the directory where your schema is. And the fast way for me to do it is again copy and paste, rather than just trying to navigate there. And there's my schema, so I click on it. It's called Case XSD in this demo. And then what it does, it has like a little schema explorer over here. And what that allows you to do is to drag and drop fields from your schema onto this, both the if conditions and the actions at the bottom. So let's say, for instance, here, if the employment status is invalid, let's just say, for instance, I accidentally delete this rule. So first of all, I'm going to do a couple things here. I'm going to copy this text. So now notice the text is green when you can change it. A while ago it was red, both up here and earlier. See, it's red now, but when I click on it, it becomes green. Well, in this case, black. But it's green, meaning it's changeable. Okay, and so this text I'm going to take and copy. And I'm just going to stick it in Notepad real quick so I don't lose it here. Now let's say I delete this rule, or no, sorry, it's not a rule, it's an action. Right here, click delete action. Okay, now I want to re-add it just to show you how they built this in the first place. So the first thing is, what rule were they setting? This was the negation of the employment status rule. So down here they picked employment status, and you drag it over here and really just drop it anywhere in this section called then, somewhere under actions. Now if I do it several times, you can see I can drag several fields and then they'll be in a specific order. Let's say if we tried to drop this one, so you can't drop it in between. If you drop it on the bottom, sorry, it's a little noisy there. Let's drop this one again. If you drop it on the bottom and you want to move it, what you can do is click here and then say move up or move down. In this case I can't move down because it's already at the bottom. So see, I can move it up, I can right click move up, right click move up. So there is no drag and drop as far as moving it up and down. You have to use the move up and move down feature here. Okay, and so now I want to set the employment status to this phrase here. And that was right here. It says enter a value. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to paste or type in my value. Now these others were just examples. I was just trying to show you how it works. So now I'm going to do delete each one of those. So I'm doing right click, delete action, right click, delete action. So that shows you it's possible to do more than one thing in an action. I could actually set another field based on this. Now at the top here, let's suppose I wanted to change this. Instead of making it a not greater than 15, let me make it a less than 15. Okay, so first of all I will click on and delete the not, and then that rule or action or if statement that was under it just kind of moved up, the condition. Now there is no way, unfortunately, here to change to a different type of logic. If I want to say less than, the choice to switch is not here. So notice it's time in months and it's greater than or equal to 15. So I'm going to have to delete it. So what I did there was I clicked delete, but I did it on the argument. So to delete the whole line, I would click here on the is greater than or equal and then click delete. And now the whole thing goes away. So how do we put a condition in up here? It's not as intuitive as you think, because the first thing you might want to do, like you saw a few minutes ago, at the bottom we just drag on here and there it is. But if you try to drag something to the top, you see it won't drop. It acts like it's going to drop, but then it won't actually drop. So what you have to do is click on conditions, then do a right click, then do predicates, and now you pick your greater than or less than or equal or whichever one you want. So what we had before was greater than or equal, and I wanted to switch it to a less than. Okay, now you can take your field time in months. Now you drag it on one of the two sides of the arguments, and then now you slide over, and I'm going to type in 15 there. So now I've corrected or changed the rule to say instead of not greater than or equal to 15, I made it a little simpler and said less than 15. Now notice this is XPath syntax here. This is basically the Microsoft Samples BizTalk Loans Processor.case. That is your project namespace. So again, if we go back to your orchestration here, okay, notice my project name is Loan Processor. So where do they get this name? Microsoft Samples blah 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 blah. So click here on your schema. And even the target namespace is not that. So let's try this. Click here on the schema, and then right here it's actually this namespace. So this is more like a .NET namespace, whereas when you click on the word schema, that's your target namespace. So this is your .NET namespace, Microsoft Samples BizTalk Loan Processor. Go back to the Business Rule Composer, Microsoft Samples BizTalk Loan Processor, and then they put .case. So see here the type name. The type name then becomes, I believe, the second value. Then they start doing a colon followed by XPath. So they say go to the root element, and then go to employee type, and then go to time in months. So there's the root element, there's the employment type, and there's the field called time in months. And notice it doesn't look quite like this XPath. So it's sort of is XPath, but they've kind of abbreviated it and changed it a little bit. However, I believe that you can see your XPath over here. So in this lower corner, again, these windows are just not big enough. If you click time in months here, you can see the display name that's displayed over here. And that's not a field you can change. And then here's your full XPath. So the display name is like a shortened version of the XPath because you don't have a lot of screen space over here. And even this name you can see is kind of long. So when we get to vocabularies, that's another way you can shorten these names down so they're more humanly readable. And by the way, if you're using BizTalk 2004, you had to come down here and set the document type yourself. And now with 2006, thank goodness you don't have to do that anymore. Okay, so now let's talk about some other things you could do here. Let's make an entirely new rule. So I'm going to click here on the version, right click, add new rule, and I'm just going to call it Neil Demo. And notice it sorted it and stuck it in the right place alphabetically. And now again, to add a condition, I would have to right click here, a predicate, and lots of times you're going to say equal. And a common thing you might do in some orchestrations, it looks kind of stupid, is you make a condition called 1 equals 1. Well, we know that 1 equals 1 is always true. So there is no way to just say here, always do this. So we make up a fake little condition where 1 equals 1 or 0 equals 0 or whatever that's always going to be true, and then this action will always get performed. So what I could do, for instance, here is set this value equal to null. And what I could do is actually, here's an example. Let's put all 4 of these in here, and let's set them all equal to null. Okay, now the second part of this little trick is there is an ability to give some rules higher priorities than others. And that is done down here in this little property screen. So if you click the rule, you'll see here a priority, and it actually gives you a hint here. Of course, again, we need more screen space. So let me move these little windows up. It says, let me click my rule again, and then click on priority. It says priority of the rule within the policy. The larger the number, the higher the priority. The default is 0 and represents the middle priority. If multiple rules are triggered, the actions of a higher priority rule will be executed first. So in other words, you could have negative priorities and positive ones, but the bigger the number, it will be done first. So for instance, I could put in here 99999, and now this rule will fire first. So let's just do a test policy and see that happen. So let's go up here, and we will have to save it, but we don't have to publish it to test it. Okay, that's interesting. It says you cannot save. There are errors in the policy. Negation of employment status rule. So it actually protects you from saving your policy when it's bad. So here on this rule, you see what I did? I put a commitment status here, and I didn't enter a valid value. So what I'll do is I'll just click on that line and delete it. And now we'll go back and then save our version of our policy. And now I can do right-click test policy. And we covered this in the prior video, how we do this. So we're just going to come here, click our sample file, and then click test. And now let's look at the results. We go back up, and again we can kind of skip over the asserts here, and then look at what is evaluated. So this is where reading this can be very confusing. Here I was looking for the conditions evaluated, and I never saw my 1 equals 1. But if I scroll down to where I start seeing which rules were fired, so let me just show you right here. These are all conditions and agenda updates. But down here where it says rules fired, it actually tells you here now the rule name is Neil Demo. And it has a conflict resolution criteria of 99999, which in other words means high priority. And so out of all the rules that fired, my rule is at the top of the rules being fired. So what that should basically do is set those values to null before anything else happens. So that's an example of when you would use a priority. We'll stop this video now, and we'll come back and show you a few more tricks about using the Business Rule Composer.